My name is Michelle Zauner, and I'm the author of Crying in Mart. First, let me say how grateful I am to be here, to have the opportunity to share a little bit about myself and my book here at the Westin, and to get to listen to such brilliant and very funny writers. I was born in Seoul, Korea, the only child of a Korean mother and a white American father. When I was 1, we immigrated to the US, landing in Eugene, Oregon, a small town in the Pacific Northwest where I grew up. Our house was outside of city limits, up in the hills on 5 forested acres with no neighboring children. I attribute a lot of my creativity to that somewhat lonely childhood, over which I became very accustomed to spending a lot of time alone, entertaining myself with my own imagination. Neither one of my parents graduated from college or worked in a creative field. And so I largely acquired a taste for literature and learned most of what I know about writing as a student at Bryn Mawr, a women's liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia. At Bryn Mawr, I met a wonderful creative writing professor named Daniel Torday. He was the sort of ideal mentor that one hopes to find at a small liberal arts college. Similarly, Dan Torday had found his own mentor at Syracuse in George Saunders, who had also found his mentor at Syracuse in Tobias Wolff. So I'd like to believe I come from a long line of very prestigious literary mentorship. Something that really stuck with me, a piece of teaching advice Dan shared that had been passed down from one of these men to him, was the advice to simply take your students seriously. This gift of being taken seriously felt monumental. To be a teenager and to have an adult not only read but pore over your words, to question, to criticize, to applaud your writing. It was addicting. It was through his curriculum, and I think in large part through programs like Common Reads, that students like me who don't know where to start discover what they've been missing, how exciting writing can be, how it can be both a lens and a mirror, spiritually palpable, one in which I saw my developing self refracted and my actual self reflected in a way I never had before. I had come to Bryn Mawr with high hopes of meeting like-minded women who wanted to start riot girl bands and Xerox feminist zines. But when I got there, I was disappointed to discover that most of the student body were math and science majors, a surprising number of which we referred to as capies because they wore Hogwarts-style capes to class. Every college freshman feels a certain amount of anxiety that comes from the first time most of us are freely out of place. We get homesick. We think of transferring to some place that seems like a cure. What kept me at Bryn Mawr through trepidation and the capies mist was really Dan's reading list. I decided that if I could leave class every day with the feeling that my brain had expanded, that was more important than anything else. And slowly but surely, I acquired the courage to face the fact that if I felt like something was missing from my college experience, I would have to create that space myself. After my first short fiction class with Dan, I applied to every course he taught. I took multiple short fiction workshops, novel writing, screenwriting, and with his encouragement, I put together a proposal for an independent major in creative production, where I focused on creative writing and film studies. For my thesis, I wrote a collection of short stories and adapted one of them into a short film. Funny enough, the only course of Dan's I did not take was creative nonfiction. My book is a memoir. At the time, I thought that was because writing about my life and my family was simply uninteresting or overcomplicated. I wanted to write the rugged working-class stories I had learned to love, like Raymond Carver and Richard Ford. I wanted my characters to be neutral, defined by their actions, present on the page, without the digressions that my mixed-race background seemed to compel. In retrospect, I avoided nonfiction because it did not feel literary to be Korean American. In other words, I could not imagine a world in which I would be accepted as the main character. It was not until much later that I began to write about my life, not with concrete ambitions or forthright claim for representation, but what felt simply out of necessity. In 2014, my very healthy mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. By the late spring of that year, I had put aside my ambitions as a musician to move back to Eugene to live with her as a caretaker. 6 months later, my mother died, and what felt like everything I knew about myself, my artistic aspirations, and the bonds of my nuclear family were irrevocably altered. The following year, I started writing what became Crying in H Mart. It was sometime around the second Christmas without my mother. I was celebrating with my husband Peter's family in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And while Peter and his family welcomed me with open arms and extraordinary generosity, I missed my mother, and something compelled me to leave their home and go somewhere, anywhere, where I could feel closer to her. I drove to a Korean grocery store, an H Mart in Elkins Park. I went there, I think, to be surrounded by my mother's language, her culture, the ingredients and imports that delighted her and reminded her of home, and reminded me of my childhood visits to Seoul. I ordered dolso bibimbap at the counter, and I watched people eat. I watched a mother instruct her son to dip raw onion into his side of jajang paste. I watched an ajashi lean his tukbegi on the side of the pot holder to get to the last bites of jjigae. I watched a gaggle of exchange students commune over tteokbokki and wangmandu. And through the depths of my loss and my grief, I thought about them, where they came from, what they were searching for, how long it had been since they'd seen their families, who they were missing. And for a moment, I saw outside of my individual pain, and I felt a silent sense of community, of home. At the time, I was working as a sales assistant for an advertising firm. On weekends and evenings, I wrote. At first, I remained focused on food. I wrote about Mangchi, a Korean cooking YouTuber I had started to follow religiously after my mother had passed, who helped me learn what to do with the groceries I brought home from H Mart. Mangchi had become a sort of digital guardian for me, teaching me how to cook the same Korean dishes my mother used to make, and cooking became a kind of ritual, a way to grieve and feel closer to her. I thought it was a cute Julie and Julia type of story, and I developed it into an essay entitled, How a Korean YouTube Channel Helped Me Grieve. When it was finished, I spent my lunch breaks at the office submitting it to every food blog I could think of, Eater, Lucky Peach, Vice, Munchies. I researched every literary contest I could find without an entry fee, and I sent out hundreds of emails in hopes of just publishing it pro bono, and no one wanted it. I became discouraged. There were months of radio silence, an occasional rejection letter trickling in. I gave up hope. 9 months later, I got an email from Glamour magazine saying I'd won their 2016 Essay of the Year, and at that point, I didn't even remember applying. I thought it was spam. In addition to publication in the magazine, the contest afforded me a meeting with a literary agent, who's still my agent today, and $5,000. And around that time, my band, Japanese Breakfast, was still fledgling and had found some minor success with the financial life raft of the prize money. I was able to quit my day job and devote myself to music and writing full time. For the next 4 years, I wrote on and off tours, in the back of vans, on planes, at coffee shops, in between soundcheck and showtime. I was writing a story that turned out to be much larger than food, though cooking and culture remained a central part of it. I wanted to capture my mother's character and the unique love we shared for one another. Like the working class authors I admired, I wanted to showcase the ordinary, to write true, simple things, to archive the idiosyncratic details, bad and good, which emerged in the tumultuous rifts that opened between a first-gen immigrant and her American-raised daughter. I wrote about the ravages of illness and grief, of feeling untethered from a culture that always felt, for better or for worse, an inherent part of me. It was a way of exorcising demons, of making sense of trauma, of archiving memory. But when I finished and I realized that anyone could read it, a great fear crept in. Selfishly, I had written Crying in H Mart for me. Maybe my experiences would not resonate. Maybe they were entirely singular and unfairly generalized to a culture. Did I unknowingly perpetuate a stereotype? Would I be looked down upon for airing my private family struggles and history? Did I have a right to write about a culture to which I only half belonged? So it was of the utmost surprise and to my great relief that Korean Americans embraced my story so wholeheartedly. As my family fell apart, I felt my community's embrace and the stories that flooded in, a torrent of resonance and shared experience. When I met with the CEO of H Mart, still fearful they might sue me for using their name in the title, they instead offered their support. They said, "In this moment, we feel that you are everyone's Korean daughter." Since the publication of Crying in H Mart, I've received a lot of feedback from other Korean Americans that they feel represented by my story in a way they never have before. But some of my favorite exchanges have been from readers who have found my book relatable despite coming from completely different cultural backgrounds. One reader wrote, "This makes me remember the winters I spent with my mom and dad's family in Pakistan." From another reader, "I could not have said it better. Grief for me is remembering my dad and I cooking bacon and drinking coffee while everyone else sleeps at the beach." I've had Jewish readers express similar sentiments about their mother's schmaltz, Mexican readers about learning to perfect their mother's tortilla recipes, Indian readers gushing over their love for Patel Brothers Grocery. In my experience, this book has found a readership in everyone with a mother, everyone who has lost a loved one, everyone who cooks or eats, as evidenced in part by my 65 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. So while this book may have started as a portrait of a woman to whom I owe everything, a cathartic account of illness and cultural healing, by the nature of the personal being the universal in a much larger landscape, I finally discover someone like me can stand as a celebrated literary protagonist. Thank you.